Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider. It's Thursday, January the 8th. I'm Zach Ewing. That's Wilson Alexander and Reed Darcy. It's been a while. A lot has happened. So let's get into it. Wilson, the busiest man in Baton Rouge, how are you doing right now?
I don't know if I'm busier than Lane Kiffin and his coaching staff, though. They are keeping us busy. LSU, at the time of recording, has added 14 new
in fact,
transfers.
Our graphic says 12. That's how fast this is happening. That was made like an hour and a half ago. It's now 14.
They got two defensive linemen this morning, Jalen Brown from South Carolina and Malik Blockton from Auburn. And yeah, that entire staff over there, I think, is busier than we are. We're just trying to keep up with them.
That is true. And we knew LSU needed a lot of players, Reed. And I mean, here we go. Like over the weekend, it kind of looked like it was just, I wouldn't even call it a slow start. It's just that people expected immediate action. And it's not even been a week, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like LSU was being a little bit selective at first, of, being targeted to certain guys, but LSU lost almost 30 players to the transfer portal, so I think it's only natural to assume that they'd probably bring back close to 30 players from the transfer portal. So I guess they're almost halfway to that point. I guess by the time the episode posts, they might get a couple more. It just moves. Things move very quickly, and they have a lot of needs to address. So it's going to be a couple more weeks of this, I think.
And again, the slow. I don't think it was a slow start in terms of they didn't add a bunch of commitments right away, but it wasn't a slow start in terms of they had brought in a bunch of people on visits over the weekend, and now you're seeing the results of that work that started right away. There was behind the scenes work on getting that kind of stuff lined up, talking to agents, making sure that these guys that they were interested in were interested in them, and then having those visits lined up, and then boom, now you're seeing all that with already up to 14. LSU's got a highly rated class, and there's a lot of work still to be done, and we'll see how that goes over the next week and a half or so here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so 14 in, I think it was 28 out. And so you assume those numbers will end up somewhat even. And so they may not even be halfway done yet. We shall see. We're going to dig into who they have, the quarterback situation, and more. First, I want to let you know that the LSU Sports Insider is brought to you by Jerry Lane Cadillac. Command the road in a Cadillac where luxury, power, and presence come together. Experience it today at Jerry Lane Cadillac. So of the 14, Wilson, who sticks out as this guy's an impact player or expected to be an impact player in 2026?
I figured we start with the quarterback situation. Okay. Who's expected to be an impact player? A couple of guys come to mind. Ty Benefield, the safety from Boise State. This is a guy who had 107 tackles last year for Boise State and 8.5 tackles for loss as a safety. That's impressive stuff. And the staff that I've heard is really high on just everything that he brings, his character and just all the makeup and all those things. But also just that he's a really productive player. LSU needed a new star position. Harold Perkins was in that last year. Not a perfect fit, Harold Perkins in the star. That's more usually a position that's played by a defensive back. And that's what I think you have here with Ty Benefield. LSU could play him at deep safety, but I think that would make a lot of sense to play him kind of around the box because he is such a good tackler. And he comes downhill pretty violently. So, now LSU's got some depth in the secondary, some proven experience with him. He was first team All-Mountain West. I really like that pickup. And then on the offensive side, pick one of these receivers. Maybe Jace Brown from Kansas State. The other one who's going to be really intriguing is Eugene Wilson from Florida, if he can stay healthy. And, LSU fans might remember talking all offseason about, if Nick Anderson can stay healthy, and he didn't. But if Eugene Wilson can stay healthy, this is a pretty dynamic guy. He's just been dealing with injuries the past 2 years. It's limited his production, his time on the field. But as a freshman, he had like 61 catches. So I think him and Jace Brown from Kansas State impresses me as well. They've added quite a few guys, but I think those are probably the two or three that stand out the most to me right away.
They went after a certain archetype of receivers. I think they really were intentional about getting guys who can win over the top, speedy kind of guys, deep threats. The first three they signed all averaged at least 17 yards per catch. last season. So I think they try to bring some more verticality to the offense and really try to restock that wide receiver room with guys who can win over the top. Now, I think when you combine those guys with someone like Trey'Dez Green and then the running game, you can see kind of the pieces coming together, but LSU still needs to figure out, number one, who's going to be throwing passes to those guys, and number two, who's going to be blocking for the guy throwing them passes. So I think the defense overall, like Wilson mentioned, the defense, you can kind of see it's coming together. You can kind of pencil guys in the starting spots. They just added a defensive tackle from Auburn. They also added a defensive tackle from Clemson, who played a good bit last year. So I think the defense is pretty much close to being, I guess, almost solidified. But the offense, I think they still have a lot of work to do at a lot of really important spots.
And that makes sense because when you retain your defensive coordinator and a lot of that defensive staff, you have those relationships built in. There's a continuity there that really helps at this time of year. And now, LSU is able to keep a lot of the defensive players, and they only needed to add bits and pieces, particularly on the defensive line. And we've seen them add now 3 defensive linemen. There will be more, particularly at edge rusher. They've already hosted Chaz Coleman from Penn State. They're hosting Jordan Ross from Tennessee. John Henry Daly. Yes, John Henry Daly from Utah. That would be a big pickup. He had like 11 sacks this past year or something. So they had some needs there up front on defense, but everything else, especially in the secondary, was pretty close to set. They still need a linebacker, though, for sure, on the defensive side.
And the 2 receivers, Jackson Harris from Hawaii and Trey Brown from Old Dominion. Those are the 2 guys, the kind of deep threats I wanted to highlight. It felt like LSU was pretty selective in going after them.
Yeah, both top 10 nationally in yards per catch this past year.
Done it at the lower level, something Lane Kiffin and his staff see, hey, we think this can translate. So interesting adds there. But as you said, and let me throw out one more before we go into what they still need. Scott Starzik is your starting kicker.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not nothing. Like you need him to come in and play well too.
And he went 14 of 18 at Arkansas, 2 for 3 on those kicks, over 50 yards with a long of 53. Freshman All SEC. And now you've got your new kicker there to replace Damian Ramos. Aaron Burrell entered the transfer portal, needed somebody. And Scott Starzik was a really highly rated guy coming out of high school and pretty productive. And you want him to maybe be just a little bit more consistent. But 14 of 18 is in all of his extra points is a great thing as a freshman. I mean, a freshman starter right away. The first kick he ever made in college was a 53-yard field goal.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was his career long, and like you want a guy with range out to there, so he seems like a good fit. But yeah, they're going to count on him, so you need that one to hit. Okay, you mentioned it, Reed. Going into this portal window, the 2 things LSU needed above anything else, any casual fan could tell you, certainly the people watching this podcast could tell you, they needed offensive linemen and they needed quarterbacks. They don't really have either of those things yet. So let's start with the quarterbacks. That's still the things that are missing. By now, probably everybody who's following it knows sort of the drama with this. They went after Brendan Sorsby, the Cincinnati quarterback. He chose Texas Tech. That could have been finances. That could have been his girlfriend goes to Texas Tech, right?
Yeah, Brendan Sorsby, I mean, people throughout the industry, as soon as he entered the transfer portal, the expectation was he was going to go to Texas Tech. He's from Texas. His girlfriend is a volleyball player who transferred to Texas Tech. And Texas Tech, with Cody Campbell backing it, has a lot of money to spend right now. Their deal was reportedly $5 million. LSU's deal, according to Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports, got a copy of it, was able to obtain that. And that was going to be, I think it was $3.5 million, but plus some extra, maybe up to like $4.5 million. So the money was fairly comparable, but it always seemed like he was going to be going to Texas Tech. But LSU made a push, got him in for a visit on campus. But it would always, I think, have been quite the upset if they had been able to prevent him from signing with Texas Tech.
Right. I was going to say LSU was the underdog in that situation. So, okay, you took your shot there, didn't get it. The Ole Miss quarterbacks, who were, for obvious reasons, mentioned in connection with Lane Kiffin. Trinidad Campbell still doesn't know about his waiver. Ole Miss plays in the national semifinal tonight, but he's come out and said if he does get the waiver, he's going to stay in Oxford. The other one was Austin Simmons. He's committed to Missouri. So neither one of the Ole Miss quarterbacks is coming here. So I don't know, Wilson, if this is LSU going down its list or if, especially in the case of Simmons, they just, okay, we like Sam Leavitt better. And so Sam Leavitt came in on a visit. And now we have this DeMond Williams situation from Washington.
I don't know that Austin Sims was ever like the Ole Miss quarterback that LSU wanted. They
Right.
would have wanted Trinidad Chambliss. And, Trinidad even acknowledged in interviews that he's done how, LSU was something that he considered and was certainly open to him coming. Lane Kiffin was even involved in helping him line up Tom Mars as his representation and trying to get the NCAA to approve a waiver that's, as you said, still ongoing. But Trinidad stays at Ole Miss, re-signs there, obviously contingent upon the 6th year. Sam Leavitt and now DeMond Williams has been near the top of LSU's list this entire time. Sam Leavitt is one of the highest rated players in the portal. According to, I think, 24/7, he's the number 1 player in the portal. And obviously, those rankings depend on where you look around, but either way, it's consensus top player in the transfer portal. So you're not moving down your list to get Sam Leavitt. And you're not moving down your list really either with DeMond Williams. This is somebody who committed at one time to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss in high school, ends up signing with home state Arizona instead, and then follows the head coach there, Jed Fish, to Washington when he takes that Washington job a few weeks later. This was something that we'd heard about maybe behind the scenes, like if he entered the transfer portal, that it was somebody to keep an eye on for LSU. It's just that it was a little bit surprising that he hit the portal 4 days after signing. Well, excuse me, I say hit the portal. He hasn't been entered into the portal yet, but said that he will transfer 4 days after re-signing with Washington. And so these are both guys that a lot of schools would want, and I don't think you're really moving down your list for either of them.
No. And I think the impression of that just comes from the fact that maybe there were other names that everyone initially connected with LSU that are not going to happen. But that doesn't mean these guys were in any way backup plans. DeMond Williams wasn't even on people's list because he said he was going back to Washington. That's the crazy one. So before we get into the discussion of tampering and who's doing it, which is everyone, and that whole situation, do you think LSU has a preference here between Leavitt or Williams?
I think the preference might be Williams at this point, but I'm not totally sure in that. That's more of a gut feeling, particularly based on him entering the portal when he did. Mm-hmm. It feels like maybe LSU was trying to help make that happen a little bit. And so, and he's the one that LSU's the school has been tied most closely to him. We know sources have said that LSU has interest in him. But I don't know if they have a preference necessarily. And I think that they would probably be okay with either one. The concern with Leavitt certainly is the health. He had a foot injury last year, ended up undergoing season-ending surgery. How much is he going to be able to do in the spring is a question mark. DeMond Williams is healthy, would be able to play right away in the spring. That's certainly an advantage. But again, both of these guys are good players. I don't know that you're necessarily going to end up with, if you get either one of them, I think you feel pretty good about your quarterback.
Yeah, this is not inside info in any way. This is just like an Occam's razor trying to figure out what happened in the most logical way. Sam Leavitt visited LSU on Monday and Tuesday.
Into Wednesday.
And then he went to Tennessee. Is that right? So one of two things happened in my eyes. Either one, LSU was maybe slightly worried about the foot injury after seeing it in person, or number two, they're concerned Leavitt is going to Tennessee. And a lot of times, if these guys don't commit right after their visit, somebody else gets in their ear, somebody else makes an offer. There's uncertainty there, and that's when the DeMond Williams thing comes. I don't know if that timeline tracks.
DeMond Williams announced that he was going to transfer, I think, while Sam Leavitt was sitting next to Lane Kiffin at the LSU men's basketball game on Tuesday night. It's just a crazy situation. And I want to point out, LSU's not the only major player in the market for a quarterback. Miami needs a quarterback. Like we mentioned, Tennessee needs a quarterback. Oregon, if Dante Moore goes to the draft, Oregon's going to need a quarterback. So there's a lot of openings, I think, for quarterbacks, and maybe there's not enough big name quarterbacks to go around. So LSU has to compete with some pretty heavy hitters for these two guys, I think.
You said two options that you thought maybe.
You have a third? Okay.
Could be that LSU was wanting DeMond Williams, talking to DeMond Williams, but entertaining and hosting other quarterbacks because he had not entered the transfer portal. And then upon him entering the transfer, or saying that he would enter the transfer portal, or just transfer, that he would transfer. I keep saying enter the transfer portal because it's so standard. That's what everybody does.
But Washington won't put him in.
He may have to, but his situation is complicated. He may have to just unenroll at Washington and enroll at LSU and never technically enter the transfer portal.
The transfer portal is just this abstract, cloudy kind of in the air thing. It's just the transfer portal. Yeah. It's not the physical portal, but
right. He's going to transfer. And so so he says he'll transfer, and then LSU is able to move on him. But if you don't know that he's going to do that, because 4 days earlier he said he was going to stay at Washington, then you have to look elsewhere. But now maybe you don't have to look elsewhere. And maybe you can go and try to get him and kind of let Sam Leavitt turn his attention to maybe Tennessee, or maybe Miami gets in the mix there or something like that. I think maybe Miami also tries to get in the mix for Damon Williams. So I don't know. You're not the only school, only team in this race, probably.
Yeah, and that's true. That's a good point. Maybe LSU didn't think Damon Williams was going to be an option, and then all of a sudden he was.
Why would you? He said 4 days earlier he was coming back.
A lot of times they know more than we do. I don't. That's my only response to that. So who knows? But either one of these guys, as you say, Wilson, a very good option. Damon Williams, this season threw for 3,065 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 69.5% completion percentage. Sam Leavitt, he only played in 7 games, but he threw for 1,628 yards, 10 touchdowns, 3 picks. Last year, he was almost 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So, these are good, experienced players who you expect to come in and be successful here. I do think it's getting paramount to the point that LSU get one of them.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Otherwise, I'm not sure who's out there on the market who's really at the top of the list. You would maybe have to continue to sort of see if anybody else enters, kind of thing. If one of them does not come, I would be surprised though if LSU did not get one of these 2 players. They had Sam Leavitt in on a visit. The only other visits he's taken are to Tennessee and to Kentucky. He was considering going to Texas Tech, but that got canceled, or he just didn't take the trip and ends up coming to LSU. And then you're very closely linked here to Damon Williams and has a lot of interest, and I think that interest may be mutual. And at least as far as we know, like we said, Miami's in the mix for a quarterback, but LSU's willing to spend a lot of money. They've got connections with these guys. I would be surprised if they did not end up with one of them. If they don't, then it starts to get really kind of concerning about which direction they turn to. But I'd be surprised if they didn't end up with one of them. But also the other thing about both of these guys, skill set seems to fit the offense. Every single quarterback, and this is fairly common in college football these days, of course, but all these quarterbacks that LSU has been linked to, they're mobile. They're running the ball, and that is certainly something that Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss want in their quarterbacks, and both of these guys have shown the ability to do that.
Mobility and accuracy are big deals for this system. If you got both of them, I think you're a pretty natural fit for a Lane Kiffin offense. Both of these guys have those things, so I think that's something LSU fans could be excited about. You can see the possibilities of him in a Lane Kiffin offense at LSU. I think both of these guys are pretty good fits for what Lane Kiffin wants to do.
Right, and we entered this portal. It still sounds weird to say. Yeah, it's like you walked in a door or something that says portal over it. Like, no.
It goes from the holiday season to the portal season.
We entered this season knowing LSU was going to be a very attractive location for a quarterback, between the opportunity, the money, the prestige, all of those things that LSU offers. And so the chances are very good that they get one of these guys. Maybe they get their pick of these guys. But they do need to make sure they get one of them, I think. So
what's your level of panic if LSU, or level of concern if LSU doesn't, on a 1 to 10?
I mean, I'm at like an 8 at that point. What about you? Maybe somebody else surprising enters the portal, but
that's about where I am. I mean, I'm not sure who plan C would be or who plan B would be, but it seems like that it's down to these 2. Once you exhausted the Brandon Sorsby option, once Trinidad Chambliss stayed put, and once Austin Simmons, I think, wound up at Missouri, it kind of came down to these 2 guys, and they're the 2 big fishes left. So I think that's what LSU is going for and what LSU is hoping for.
The danger, of course, is that this is a game of musical chairs. And while you're waiting on DeMond Williams, Sam Leavitt says, well, I'm going to take the bird in hand and go to Tennessee. And then DeMond Williams, which we need to talk about that situation a little more in depth, suddenly decides he needs to stay at Washington for legal reasons or otherwise. And then you're left without a chair.
That feels untenable. Also, Washington just hosted Bo Perbula.
It does.
They're preparing to move on.
And again, this is unlikely, but that is the one scenario where you're like, okay, maybe it does turn out that way. So this DeMond Williams situation, let's talk through it. Wilson, give us a kind of a Cliff's Notes of how this all went down.
Well, as we talked about already, he announces, and the school does, on January 2nd, that he will be re-signing, that he is agreed to a new deal, which is so weird to say for college players still, kind of adjusting to that one, but that he is re-signed and will stay at Washington for the 2026 season. Okay. 4 days later, he says that he is entering the transfer portal. And this was Washington, according to multiple reports, believes that there was tampering involved. That one school in particular, which may be LSU, was reaching out to DeMond Williams after he had said that he would resign. They believe that they have a legally binding contract with him and that they are going to enforce the terms of that contract in order to maybe prevent him from leaving, or at least maybe regain some money back, enforce some kind of buyout that could be involved in the contract. That's where things are going to get very interesting from a legal standpoint. How enforceable is this stuff? He's not an employee. What they're paying for technically are NIL rights. Do you withhold his NIL rights from the next school, which is often what these guys, again, are getting paid through? I don't know how that would work. He might also say, well, I'm just leaving after 4 days, so here's 4 days worth of whatever I was going to be paid by you. You sort of prorate that. I don't know. That's why the other thing is he has not been entered into the transfer portal by Washington because all that has to go through their compliance department. He is, and maybe we'll just unenroll at Washington and enroll at LSU as like I guess technically a walk-on. I don't know how that would work exactly. There's still kind of a lot to sort of figure out. This is unprecedented. And I was talking to somebody today who was saying how, people in lawyers, particularly want precedent. They want predictability, and this situation does not have that. It's sort of pretty close to unlike anything we've seen in college sports. But it might not be the last time it happens, and so it'll be interesting to see if this ends up going through the courts in any way. If Washington does try to sue to because of this contract, I don't know that would prevent him from coming to LSU, but it would be something that's kind of hanging over things. And then maybe there would be some kind of ruling that sort of sets a precedent for all of this, but we're not there yet.
There hasn't been a situation like this since schools started sharing revenue with athletes last summer. There have been similar kind of situations.
There was Xavier Lucas
was at Nebraska. I'm Wisconsin. There's him. He was a DB. Didn't play a whole lot. There's the edge rusher from Georgia, whose name I'm forgetting now.
Damon Wilson.
Yeah, he went from Georgia to Missouri. There's a legal battle with Georgia over the money he owed them. It's never been a quarterback, number one, a starting quarterback in the revenue sharing era who's getting money directly from Washington trying to get out of the contract. So I think there's a scenario where he just, unenrolls at Washington, goes to his new school, plays football for that new school, and then he's on the field while this kind of legal battle is kind of brewing just tangentially off to the side, and it doesn't affect the new school that he's at. But there's also a situation where I think the new school might have some questions over if they can really bring this guy in, and would they have to pay some kind of buyout to bring him in, and what's the financial aspects of it all. The important point to note here is that none of us know exactly how this is going to play out. Nobody in the industry, the college sports industry, knows how it's going to play out. I think everybody is watching this kind of situation to kind of figure out what the new landscape is going to be like, and if this is going to affect how schools and players and teams operate moving forward. And so that's the backdrop for LSU's search for a new quarterback. It's really crazy. Like this LSU is things have been pretty wild just in the past couple of days regarding this situation, and there's just so many questions.
I think if LSU wants to bring him in, it just might have to get a little bit more creative with how the money works, because LSU now, through its deal with Playfly Sports, Playfly, which is its multimedia rights partner, is sort of constructing contracts and arranging third-party NIL deals in order for LSU to exceed the revenue sharing cap. Players are also getting money directly from the school, but then they're getting much more over that. But if Washington is withholding his NIL rights, the player can still sign outside marketing agreements. It just might not quite be exactly the same way that most of the other players on the roster have that done. It's not quite as straightforward now, at least in this scenario. So we'll see if that maybe I don't know that we'll ever find out if that happens or not. These things are not subject to public records law, so it's hard to know.
The big picture here is that if this were any other industry, any other situation in America, you have to abide by your contract and you can be held liable. And
they're not employees.
They're not employees.
We're employees of a company. They're not employees.
Which the NCAA and these schools have held on to for years. And so this is kind of in no way their own fault.
They're still clinging on to this.
Yeah. And because of that, it's kind of like you can't break the rules because there are no real rules. There's always a way around it. And so Washington can sit here and say, well, we're not going to let you go into the transfer portal. That's one of the levers we can pull. Okay, but as you said, Wilson, he'll just unenroll and nothing is stopping him from going and playing football somewhere else. The other thing they could do is try to sue him, but then Washington is running the risk of sending a message to future recruits and future transfers that we're going to play hardball with you if things don't work out here, and maybe that makes them less attractive for those future players. So Washington's in a really difficult spot here. LSU seems set to take advantage, but where it goes from here is anybody's guess.
Yeah, especially because I think that under NCAA rules, if he has not entered the transfer portal and signed this agreement, he is technically not supposed to have conversations with another school, which is why Washington may compile evidence of tampering and submit something to the NCAA accusing schools of tampering with DeMond Williams. And I think that he would like to I think LSU would like to bring him in on a visit. Not sure when that can happen exactly because of where the situation is at as we speak right now at 11:09 on Thursday morning. But to your other point, Dan Wetzel of ESPN made this point, and I think it's pretty sound. He was saying yesterday, the DeMond Williams Jr. situation is rough for Washington, which thought it had a deal, yet you can't really have an employment deal if you don't count the player as an employee. There's been so much time spent by college leaders talking about this is amateurism, and now we're in this very weird middle ground between amateurism and professionalism where you end up with situations like this.
So, in short, it's complicated, and I'm glad you gave the time, Wilson, because who knows? By the time that this podcast posts or by the time you're watching it, this whole situation could have taken another turn, or it could come to a resolution. We don't know. But at 11:09 a.m. on Thursday, that's where we're at. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to kind of look at what's next for LSU in the portal, maybe talk offensive line and some of those things that are still outstanding for the Tigers. Be back right after this.
I think the biggest thing that separates us is our people. We have a really amazing staff that really care about their customers, really care about our product. At Jerry Lane Cadillac, we value trust and transparency above all else. We have a little bit of something for everyone. So whether it be the 2025 Escalade, any of the smaller crossover vehicles, the XT4, 5, and 6, we've also got a wide variety of new EVs, including the 2025 electric Escalade IQ. I think the product lineup right now is the best that it's ever been in Cadillac.
Did they ask you to do the commercial too?
Yeah, but they just gave me one line.
Bet like a Caesar. Like, we're going to sit here and we're going to tell them how Caesar's Sportsbook is just so easy to use that you can watch and bet thousands of sports events, even some NFL games.
They'll probably show us betting on our favourite players and teams at all the Vegas hotspots too.
Like, we have time for that montage.
I told him I couldn't do it.
They couldn't afford me.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional health care for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You gave me love.
Welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider. It is Thursday, January the 8th. You can subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Encourage you to leave in the comments what your take is on the DeMond Williams situation and what LSU eventually does at quarterback. We are brought to you by Jerry Lane Cadillac. We're also brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care, specialist services, or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. So, guys, we're going to shift our focus a little bit, talk about what's next for LSU in the portal. Mentioned, quarterback is obviously the headline situation here. Also need a lot of offensive linemen, Wilson. We've been talking about this. They don't have a lot right now.
Yeah. Yes, they do. They need a lot of offensive linemen. They're only bringing back a handful of guys. And as long as Braylon Moore does return, which it seems like he will, you've got your center. But Weston Davis is coming back. And do you feel comfortable with him as your starting right tackle again? If I were LSU, I would certainly bring in competition there. Maybe Solomon Thomas can play as a sophomore. He was a 5-star recruit, didn't play as a freshman. But you're needing starters here. You're needing probably up to 4 guys who are capable of starting.
At least.
Yeah. And we haven't seen yet a whole lot of names with LSU in the transfer portal. We know Jacoby Jones, a junior college transfer, was on campus this week. Things might be trending with him. They hosted an offensive lineman from Minnesota, Khalid Tafai, but he's barely played much during his career, so I don't know if you're bringing him in as a starter. And Wilkin Formby, who transferred from Alabama, who had been recruited by Eric Walford, LSU's new offensive line coach, he ends up committing with Texas A&M. Never, I don't think, was on campus at LSU as far as I know. And so we just kind of have to see how this continues to play out over the next week. This is going to be the biggest. This and obviously however quarterback ends are going to be the biggest things left for LSU to do in the portal over the sort of second half of it.
The thing here, Zach, is that there's not a ton of offensive linemen in the portal, guys who have experience playing for a power conference team, guys who have starting experience for an SEC team. They are out there, but there's not very many of them. I think when LSU lost Carius Kern, and when he hit the portal, he kind of instantly became one of the transfer portal's best offensive linemen, right? And I believe he's headed to Ole Miss now. So it's kind of a tricky situation. It's hard to take offensive linemen and project them forward into a higher level of competition. Take somebody from the group of 5 and then ask him to start in the SEC. You don't really know if he's going to be able to handle that jump in physicality and size and speed and athleticism. So it's kind of a dicey situation. You want to ideally get some proven starters with a ton of experience, but there's not a ton of guys out there. So LSU is trying to figure out who those guys are going to be. Maybe they get some guys from Ole Miss after the playoff runs, whenever that is. But for now, it's kind of just waiting to see who they go after and who they sign.
They need people. And since you mentioned Carius Kern, I did want to kind of address the Ole Miss situation here because he goes to Ole Miss. Obviously, LSU still has coaches in the building at Ole Miss as they prepare to play Miami in the Fiesta Bowl National Semifinal tonight. Are there players you think they're waiting on to finish their seasons with Ole Miss, Wilson? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think so. The wide receiver, Winnie Watkins, I think is someone who LSU is interested in. They're obviously we're interested in Kejuan Lacey and Trinidad Chambliss, and they both stayed at Ole Miss.
At least they said they would. You never know.
Yeah, I guess none of that matters anymore, huh? I think they're staying at Ole Miss. So you got to, those are like the big names that LSU would have been interested in. With them there's still a lot of other people though on that team, and with so many of them having relationships with this offensive staff, it could certainly be something that LSU is waiting on for some players. The one that's interesting though is would they be able to bring a bunch from the offensive line? LSU did not hire Ole Miss's offensive line coach. They got James Craig back, interestingly enough, but he is an analyst. He wasn't the main offensive line coach, but perhaps some people will come down here as well. We'll just kind of have to wait and see when the season ends, and that could be you run the risk of them just staying at Ole Miss. If that is the case with anybody who else you might be interested in from Ole Miss, because the longer the season goes, the more time Ole Miss has with them in the building, the more chance they have to get them to re-up like they did with Chambliss and Lacey. And so LSU needs to kind of get a move on with the offensive line.
Yeah, just to remind people of the rules and the timeline here, if Ole Miss should win tonight and play in the national championship, its players then get 5 days after that to enter the transfer portal, even though for everyone else it would be closed. But as you said, you're kind of walking this tightrope of, are those guys actually going to enter the portal? Or would playing for a national championship at Ole Miss, they'd look around and say, well, why would we won't have it any better than this anywhere else? Why would we leave? So there's complicating factors here. One of them is that Ole Miss is sort of, you hear these cries of tampering and that they're worried about this and that. And I don't know. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You want these coaches to help coach you in the college football playoff, but you don't want them to talk to your players. Like what? I think that kind of falls on deaf ears as far as I'm concerned. But it is complicated. I don't know though. Are there offensive linemen there? You still got to go elsewhere, right?
You do. You need to go elsewhere because you're not just going to be, I don't think, able to just take Ole Miss's entire offensive line or something like that. You also have you need 8 offensive linemen.
Right.
And so you're going to have to get those from elsewhere. And that's why Jacoby Jones and some of these other names, I think LSU will continue to start to pick up some traction with some offensive linemen in the week ahead. If they don't, then we said quarterback concern would be an 8, offensive line concern would be a 10. That would be that would be whew.
You need 2 tackles, you need 2 guards, you need depth behind them. LSU lost so many guys, and a lot of these guys are headed to SEC schools. I think Tyree Adams is going to A&M, Cohen Eccles is going to A&M. Like we mentioned, Karis Kearns going to Ole Miss, and I'm forgetting somebody.
Ori Williams.
Ori Williams is Tennessee, right? So, LSU lost a lot. Those guys, again, keep in perspective, those guys were on one of the worst offensive lines LSU's had in recent memory. So, you want to try to bring in some new talent to see if you can get more production out of that unit. But again, you have to upgrade that talent. And it's not exactly a sure thing when you're going into the transfer portal. How many positions can you actually upgrade? So it's a really tricky situation, and it's not going to be cheap either, especially when you're getting 2 tackles. Those guys don't come very cheap.
LSU can certainly upgrade on last year's offensive line. It wouldn't even be that difficult to do, but you better get started on it. So anything else portal-wise you're looking at over the next few days before we would talk again?
Defensive end. They're connected to a few different, or hosted, or are hosting a few different edge rushers. Mentioned Chaz Coleman, John Henry Daly, Jordan Ross. Curious to see what happens there because LSU needs edge rushers. Going to have to replace the 3 seniors who were in that rotation, and they don't have much proven experience coming back. So that would be the big one. I'm also interested to see what happens with running back. If we're going to stay on the offensive side for a minute, like we said, there was sort of a lot of thought that maybe Kejuan Lacey would come with Kevin Smith and Lane Kiffin. He stays at Ole Miss. You've added a couple of running backs who certainly provide depth, but are not sort of those instant starters that you would think of necessarily. With Racine Guillory and Rod Gainey. So they need to continue to find somebody who can complement Harlan Berry as they continue to round out that room.
Ideally, someone kind of stronger and more physical, because those 2 guys are kind of on the smaller end, kind of speed kind of guys. I think to complement Harlan Berry, you need someone more like a bruiser, and so that would be the ideal fit next to him.
I enjoyed the mini flex you did as you did that.
Yeah, for those who couldn't see Reed.
Yeah. Podcast audience.
Need to be bigger than Reed Darcy, though.
Yeah, a lot bigger. A lot bigger.
Okay, so that's sort of portal talk for today. We'll be back next week. We'll obviously have more. Who you guys got in the college football playoff semifinals? So Ole Miss, Miami tonight, and then Oregon, Indiana tomorrow.
So LSU fans are going to hate this, but I'm getting to cover the national championship game, and I would like to be able to cover. We root for the story. I'd have a lot to write about if Ole Miss won.
Ole Miss is the story.
If Ole Miss advanced to the national championship game, at least I would have a lot to write about that weekend. And then the game itself, win or lose, would be very narratively interesting. I, though, think Miami's defense has been incredible in the college football playoff. They're allowing 8 points a game. Ruben Bain has been awesome. So I think I will be taking the Hurricanes to then advance to play in their home stadium for a national title. And then tomorrow, Indiana for sure. I think Indiana's going to win it all. So
I agree. I agree on Indiana. I'm going Indiana Ole Miss. I think the Ole Miss offense is really, really good. And I think Trinidad Chambliss is really the kind of guy who can, succeed against a defense like Miami's defense. And then Indiana. I think if Indiana had a different sticker on their helmets, we would probably be thinking about them differently. I'm done underrating them. I'm done overlooking them. I'm picking them to win the national championship.
About time.
That's a great point. If they had Buckeyes on their helmets, they'd be like minus 200 to win the national title. But I want to make a case for Oregon. I was really impressed with them last week, but Indiana beat them by 10 at their place. Now they're at a neutral site. It feels hard to pick Oregon in that game. So one more topic before we go real quick, and that is LSU women's basketball plays at Georgia at 5:30 tonight, and we talked quite a bit about them in December, Reed. They're 0-2 in the SEC for those who have been all portal all the time, and I can't blame you for that. LSU's lost close games to Kentucky and to Vanderbilt to start SEC play. Obviously not what anyone had in mind. They got to find a way to win this game on the road against a pretty good Georgia team.
They absolutely do. This is probably the toughest 5-game stretch that LSU has ever played since Kim Mulkey has been here, and it's probably one of the toughest 5-game stretches Kim Mulkey has ever had in her entire coaching career. These 5 games that LSU is starting SEC play with, you're going to be playing 4 top 12 teams. You started off with Kentucky and Vanderbilt, then you've got Georgia, and then you've got number 2 Texas, and then number 5 Oklahoma right after them. So I think it's pretty shocking, pretty jarring to see them 0-2 right now, just because of where we were 2 weeks ago talking about how good they were in the non-conference. I remember when we were on the podcast with TJ, I kind of just went down the list of all the things they led the country in, and it was like 8 or 9 different statistical categories. Like, it was the most dominant non-conference stretch of the Mulkey era so far, and now they're kind of off to the worst start into conference play of the Kim Mulkey era. They need to get better. Zach, the most important thing is rebounding. Rebounding is so important to what they do. It helps them become a great defensive team by cleaning up those possessions, and it also helps them kickstart their transition offense, which is really the way they want to score and really the way in which they are most dangerous on the offensive side. They have not rebounded the ball well in these first 2 games at all. The Kentucky game was one of the worst rebounding games of the last 5 years, and things got better against Vanderbilt, but at the end, they could not get a few really important rebounds that they really, really needed to get. 2 of them were off free throws, and that's kind of become a problem. I just think it's overall kind of really surprising to see not only the team 0-2, but also to struggle rebounding the way they are. It's kind of something brand new from a Kim Mulkey team, and I'm pretty surprised by it. If you asked me in November, December, what I thought of them, I said, again, they haven't played anybody, but I think they're legit. They always play soft schedules, and they never really do things quite like this. So I am pretty surprised that they are in this hole, and I do think they really need to win tonight.
Yeah, because of that weak schedule, and Kim Mulkey always does this, so you can't blame it for the slow start. But because of that, their margin for error is less if they want to get that top 4 seed. A lot of tough games ahead. You got to start winning. They are a big favorite tonight, so we'll see what happens. That game is at 5:30, and we will be back on Monday with more portal talk. Maybe even before then. If LSU signs a quarterback, we'll probably do an emergency pod.
Oh, for sure.
We'll hop on and get an emergency pod done. So sign up for the YouTube channel. Sign up for notifications, and you will know when that happens, when we go live, and hear from Wilson and whoever else we can get to come on to talk about it. So for our producer today, Courtney Lawrence, I'm Zach Ewing. He's Wilson Alexander. And he's Reed Darcy. Thank you for watching the LSU Sports Insider.